The beer mug shattered against the wooden floor, exploding into sharp echoes that silenced Murphy's Roadhouse in an instant. The sound hung in the smoky air like a warning shot. Every conversation, every laugh, every clink of a glass cut short. Heads turned. The jukebox skipped mid-song, its buzzing silence filling the room like static before a storm. "You think you're something special?" The voice was a growl wrapped in whiskey and arrogance, thick with menace. Viper Jackson stood at the center of the storm, his 6'3" frame towering over a woman half his size. His massive hand, calloused and scarred, had bunched the fabric of her server's shirt in his fist. The collar stretched, biting into her throat. Elena Rodriguez kept her brown eyes fixed on the floor. Her hands, still damp from wiping tables, hung loosely at her sides. She didn't resist, didn't flinch. Submission radiated from her posture, a small woman caught in the grip of a predator. The rest of his men, 10 leather-clad members of the Desert Vipers Motorcycle Club, rose from their seats, circling like wolves. Their presence turned the small roadside bar into a trap. The snake tattoo coiled around Viper's thick neck seemed to writhe in the dim amber light as he leaned closer, his breath reeking of cheap bourbon. "I asked you a question, sweetheart. This bar pays protection, or this bar burns. Which one's it gonna be?" Elena's shirt clung to her frame, her ponytail limp against her back, her sneakers scuffed. She looked ordinary, forgettable even. A woman in her mid-30s working the late shift at a roadside bar on the edge of nowhere. Yet her silence held weight. Her refusal to meet his eyes wasn't fear. It was calculation. Jake, the 25-year-old bartender, stood frozen behind the counter, his face pale. He'd seen the Vipers before, heard the stories of bars burned to the ground, owners in the hospital with accidental injuries. He wanted to intervene, but his hand trembled when he reached for the bat under the counter. Then Elena's head tilted ever so slightly in his direction, a warning. "Don't." Sheriff Tom Bradley, seated in the corner booth, shifted his weight forward. Off duty, no gun, just coffee in front of him. But the bearing of 2 combat tours in Iraq never left a man, and his eyes narrowed as he measured the situation. 10 bikers. A small server. A room full of civilians. The odds were stacked, and yet something about Elena's stillness made him hesitate. Viper's voice cut again, sharp and mocking. "Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you think these people'll save you?" His men laughed, a cruel chorus that filled the room with false confidence. But Elena didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't tremble. She simply shifted her stance, almost imperceptibly. Sheriff Bradley noticed. Weight onto the balls of her feet. Arms angled for space. Chin lifted a fraction. Not the stance of a victim. The stance of someone waiting. Preparing. And when Viper Jackson made the mistake that would freeze the bar and rewrite every assumption in the room, when he tore her shirt wide open in an attempt to humiliate her, that's when the silence became something else entirely. What the room saw wasn't frailty. Wasn't weakness. It was the mark of a warrior. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps stretched across her back, bold and commanding. Inked beneath, First Force Recon. Around it, scars, bullet wounds, shrapnel burns, jagged lines that told their own grim tales. The Desert Vipers froze. Sheriff Bradley's breath caught. Veterans in the crowd straightened in recognition. And Elena Rodriguez finally raised her head. Her voice was calm. Controlled. Deadly. "Mr. Jackson," she said, using his real name, a name she shouldn't have known. "I believe you owe me an apology for destroying my property." The bar held its breath. The storm had only just begun. The room seemed suspended in time, a fragile bubble of silence stretched so thin it threatened to burst with the smallest sound. All eyes were fixed on Elena, on the black tank top clinging to her frame, on the tattoo inked with such precise artistry it might have been carved from her very soul. The eagle's wings arched proudly across her shoulders, the globe centered at the base of her neck, the anchor's flukes descending toward her spine. Beneath, in stark, bold letters, was a phrase that carried a weight most civilians would never understand: First Force Recon. For those who knew, for those who had served, it meant one thing: elite. It meant the tip of the spear, the one sent into the worst places at the worst times, expected to do the impossible and come back alive. And Elena Rodriguez had been one of them. But it wasn't just the ink. It was the scars, each one a chapter of her story written in blood and fire. A bullet wound puckered near her left shoulder blade, shrapnel traces glittering faintly under the lights along her ribs, a jagged scar disappearing beneath her tank top, hinting at the blade that had carved it. Viper Jackson's grip slackened on the torn fabric of her shirt, his bravado stuttering into disbelief. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. Behind him, his crew, men who had swaggered into Murphy's like conquering kings, now looked like schoolyard bullies caught tormenting the wrong kid. From the corner booth, Sheriff Bradley breathed the words like a prayer: Force Recon. The transformation in Elena wasn't dramatic, not in a way most would notice. She hadn't taken a stance or raised her fists. She hadn't pulled a weapon or even moved an inch closer to her aggressor. But everything about her posture shifted. The slouch of submission was gone, replaced by a quiet authority, a presence that filled the room. It was the difference between a civilian serving drinks and a Marine gunny sergeant who had seen war and lived to tell it. Mr. Jackson, she repeated, her voice no longer soft but edged with steel. You owe me an apology. A ripple of unease moved through the bar. Phones appeared in hands, recording discreetly. Veterans sat straighter, nodding silently in recognition of the code she had just invoked: discipline, respect, accountability. Viper blinked, his arrogance faltering. How do you know my name? Elena tilted her head, finally meeting his eyes. Stephen Jackson. Dishonorably discharged 6 years ago for stealing and selling military equipment. You founded the Desert Vipers 3 years ago. You're wanted for questioning in 4 arson cases, 2 aggravated assaults. She let the words land, each one a hammer blow to his carefully built image. I make it my business to know who's threatening establishments in my area of operation. The phrase was deliberate. Area of operation. Not town. Not county. Operation. She was speaking like a Marine, not a bartender. The silence thickened, broken only when a chair scraped against the floor. From another booth, a grizzled man in his 60s stood slowly, his cane tapping once on the wood. Elena had served him coffee every Tuesday for 6 months, never suspecting that beneath the quiet demeanor was Colonel Mike Harrison, retired Medal of Honor recipient. Gunny Rodriguez, he said, his voice carrying authority even without a uniform. First Force Recon. I remember you now. Fallujah. Operation Phantom Fury, 2004. Elena's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, recognition shadowing her face. She straightened unconsciously. Sir. You're the one who held that schoolhouse for 17 hours with a broken rifle and 3 magazines while evac tried to get through. Her voice caught, not with fear but memory. Lance Corporal Williams. PFC Chen. They didn't make it out. Her words cracked the air like lightning. The names of the dead had weight, heavier than any insult or threat. From near the bar, a woman stepped forward, Maria Santos, who ran the flower shop down the street. Few knew she had been a Navy corpsman once, embedded with Marines in the worst parts of Helmand. Her voice was quiet but sure. I was at Camp Leatherneck when they brought you in. 60% burns, 3 bullet wounds, shrapnel everywhere. They said you'd never walk again. Doctors can be wrong, Elena said simply. The Desert Vipers shifted uneasily, their circle unraveling as the bar itself seemed to close in around them. Every exit they'd thought they controlled was suddenly blocked by men and women who carried themselves differently now. The way veterans did when reminded they weren't alone. A Hispanic man by the pool table flexed his tattooed forearm, the ink of his sergeant stripes visible. "Leaving so soon?" he asked the bikers as they edged toward the door. "But you haven't apologized yet." Viper's jaw clenched. His face flushed red. He tried to summon the bravado that had always carried him, but it slipped through his fingers. He had made a mistake, a colossal one, and the weight of it pressed down on him. "Look," he stammered, "we didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Elena cut in, stepping forward. For the first time, Viper stepped back. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She was nearly a foot shorter, yet it was he who retreated. "Didn't know I'd bled for this country? That I'd earned the right to basic dignity? Or just that I could end you before you drew your next breath?" The veterans flanking the room stood silently, not needing to say a word. Their presence spoke volumes. The sheriff's hand hovered near his phone. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his tone formal, respectful. "Do you want to press charges? We have plenty of witnesses to what he just did." Elena shook her head once. "No need, Sheriff. Mr. Jackson and his friends were just leaving. Isn't that right?" Her tone was calm, but the threat underneath was unmistakable. "Yes, ma'am," Viper muttered, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. His men nodded quickly, eager to escape the suffocating weight of the room. But Elena wasn't finished. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Kneel." Gasps filled the bar. Viper blinked in disbelief, his brain refusing to process the command. Yet his body reacted before his pride could catch up. His knees hit the wooden floor with a dull thud, his shaved head bowed like a man facing execution. "You assaulted me. You destroyed my property. You threatened my workplace and my colleagues." Elena's words were clinical, stripped of emotion, like a Marine reading charges against a prisoner of war. "In some places I've operated, you'd already be dead. But this is America. Here, you're going to apologize." The apology came broken, halting, but it came. To Elena. To the bar. To everyone watching. When she finally nodded, he scrambled to his feet and staggered toward the door, his men trailing like whipped dogs. At the threshold, he turned back, shame etched into every line of his face. "Why hide it?" he asked softly. "Why pretend to be just a server?" Elena's expression softened just enough to be human. "Because, Mr. Jackson, real warriors don't need to advertise. We don't wear our strength like a costume. We carry it quietly, and we use it only when necessary. I came here for peace. To remember what it feels like to be normal. And tonight, you took that from me." The Vipers left without another word. Their motorcycles started outside, engines less thunderous now, more desperate. The rumble faded into the night. Inside Murphy's Roadhouse, the silence lingered. The veterans exchanged glances heavy with meaning. Civilians sat straighter, aware they had witnessed something rare, something unforgettable. Colonel Harrison broke the silence. "Gunny," he asked gently, "with your record, you could be anywhere, private security, law enforcement, teaching at Quantico. What are you doing here?" Elena picked up her torn shirt from the floor and folded it with military precision. Her voice was quiet, raw. "Because I've already been extraordinary. I've been the first in, the last out. I've killed more men than I care to count. I've got medals in a box and nightmares that wake me at 0300. Here, I could just be Elena. Just serve coffee. Just be invisible." She turned, her face lit by the dim glow of neon signs. "But maybe peace isn't something you find by hiding. Maybe it's something you create by standing your ground." The bar exhaled as one. Something had shifted forever. And Elena Rodriguez, once invisible, was visible now, whether she liked it or not. The night after the Desert Vipers slunk out of Murphy's Roadhouse was unlike any other the bar had ever known. For a long while, no one spoke. People sat frozen with their drinks, staring at Elena as if they were trying to reconcile two versions of the same person. The quiet woman who had folded napkins with almost obsessive care, and the Force Recon Marine whose very presence had just broken a gang of bikers without throwing a punch. Jake was the first to find his voice. His hand still gripped the baseball bat he had snatched from beneath the counter, knuckles white, breath shallow. "Elena," he whispered, "I had no idea. 6 months we've worked together and," his words trailed off, swallowed by the enormity of what had just unfolded. Elena adjusted her apron like nothing had happened. "That was the point, Jake," she said evenly, her voice steady, measured. "I didn't want you, or anyone, to know. Tonight, they forced my hand." Sheriff Bradley stood from his corner booth and approached her, coffee cup forgotten behind him. His steps were slow, deliberate, the steps of a man approaching not a waitress but a soldier he recognized. "Gunny Rodriguez," he said, voice carrying a deep respect. "You could have pressed charges. Hell, you could have taken every one of them down. Why let them walk?" Elena folded the torn shirt she still held, her fingers precise, almost ritualistic. "Because, Sheriff, I've already taken enough lives. Tonight wasn't about killing. It was about sending a message. Fear only lasts until the next fight. Respect lasts longer." Her words landed heavy, making the veterans scattered throughout the bar nod silently. They knew she was right. You could beat a man bloody and he'd come back with a bigger crew. But humiliate him? Break him without breaking his bones? That scarred the soul. Colonel Harrison, cane planted firmly on the wooden floor, watched her with the calculating eyes of an old commander. "You know what you've done, Gunny. You've lit a fire. Word will spread faster than wildfire through the veteran network. You're not invisible anymore." Elena's lips curved into the ghost of a smile, though her eyes remained shadowed. "Then I'll just have to learn how to be visible. On my terms." The night wound down slowly, the tension easing into something almost reverent. Patrons began to approach Elena, one at a time, tentative, as if stepping into sacred ground. They asked quiet questions, shared fragments of their own service, or simply laid a hand on her shoulder in silent solidarity. Elena accepted it all with a calm grace that came from years of discipline. But when the last of the customers filtered out, leaving only her and Jake to close up, the weight of what had happened pressed down on her shoulders. She leaned against the bar, exhaling slowly, her hand brushing against the dog tags she still wore under her shirt. Jake finally broke the silence. Are you going to leave? I mean, after tonight? Everyone knows now. You can't just fade back into the background." Elena gave him a look, steady, tired, but resolute. "Marines don't abandon their posts, Jake. This is my post now. Murphy's. This town. These people." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't meant for effect. But they carried the quiet finality of an oath renewed. The following morning, Murphy's Roadhouse looked different. Not physically, same old neon signs flickering over the door, same cracked leather bar stools, same smell of beer and fried food lingering in the air, but the energy had shifted. By noon, the parking lot was already full. Not just with locals but with cars and motorcycles bearing plates from 3 counties over. Word had spread overnight, racing through the invisible but unbreakable web of veterans who always found each other when something mattered. Inside, men and women in worn leather jackets, faded fatigues, and civilian clothes lined up for coffee, beer, or just a chance to see the woman whose tattoo had silenced the Desert Vipers. Elena tied her apron on like any other day, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. She moved with her usual precision, pouring drinks, clearing tables, her hands steady even as she felt the weight of every eye in the room. Some came up to her directly, an old Navy chief who simply said, "Semper Fi," and walked away, a young soldier still smelling of sand and dust, who asked quietly, "How do you sleep after it all?" Elena answered each question honestly, without flourish, without pretense. Others simply sat straighter in their seats, talking to each other with a new openness. Murphy's had always been a watering hole, but now it felt like something else entirely. A gathering ground. By mid-afternoon, Murphy himself returned from Phoenix. His hair was still slicked back from his trip, his Hawaiian shirt wrinkled from travel. He found Elena behind the bar, wiping glasses with her characteristic precision. "Elena," he said cautiously, I heard everything. You need time off? Or maybe you want to quit before this gets too crazy." She didn't look up from the glass she was polishing. "All due respect, Mr. Murphy, I've got tables to serve. Besides," she allowed the faintest smirk, "I think business is about to pick up." And she was right. Within 2 weeks, Murphy's Roadhouse transformed. What had once been just another roadside bar on the highway near Camp Pendleton became an unofficial rallying point. Veterans brought photos, patches, old medals. A small wall in the corner became a living memorial, growing every day as patrons contributed pieces of their service. Tuesdays turned into Veterans Night, quietly, without anyone declaring it. It just happened. People shared stories, traded resources, helped each other find jobs, or simply sat together in silence, no explanations required. And at the center of it all was Elena. Still the same woman in sneakers and a server's shirt, still cleaning tables with military precision. But now she carried herself differently. Shoulders squared. Chin lifted. The invisible Marine who had wanted nothing but peace had found a new mission, to create it. Jake watched her with awe. He had thought of her as just a co-worker, someone older, quiet, efficient. Now he saw her as something else entirely. One night, as they closed up, he blurted out the thought that had been eating at him for days. "I've been thinking of enlisting," he admitted, his face flushing. "Because of you. Because I want to stand for something. Serve something bigger than myself." Elena stopped, studied him carefully, the way a superior officer would study a recruit. Then she shook her head slowly. "Don't do it for me, Jake. Do it for you. The Corps will take everything you have and ask for more. Be sure you're willing to pay that price." I was willing. Every damn day. But that's my answer. You need to find yours. Jake swallowed hard and nodded. Her words weren't discouragement. They were a test. As Elena turned back to stacking chairs, she caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The woman staring back at her wasn't the broken veteran who had once tried to disappear. She wasn't the idealistic recruit she had been at 18. She was something forged, tempered, transformed. And though she hadn't asked for it, though she hadn't wanted it, Elena Rodriguez had become what the world around her desperately needed, a quiet guardian. Not with a rifle. Not with a battlefield. But with a coffee pot, a bar rag, and a resolve that no biker gang or demon from her past could break. The hum of motorcycles could still be heard on some nights, distant but unmistakable, like wolves howling far from the village. The Desert Vipers hadn't returned to Murphy's Roadhouse since their humiliation, but their absence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. The bar's patrons, especially the veterans, knew the look of men who'd been broken. They also knew the danger of pride. The Vipers had been forced to kneel, their leader made a fool in front of an entire room. That wasn't the kind of wound that healed. That was the kind of wound that festered. Elena knew it too. Each night she tied on her apron, her hands moved as steady as ever, but her eyes were sharper now, scanning the parking lot, checking reflections in windows, noting every unfamiliar face. She'd lived too long in combat zones not to recognize the quiet before an ambush. Still, she refused to let it change her routine. Murphy's Roadhouse was busier than ever. Veterans drove from 3 counties away to drink under the watch of the Marine bartender. Word had spread not just among them, but into civilian circles too. Contractors, truckers, locals who had never set foot in the place before now came for the chance to glimpse the woman who had silenced a biker gang with nothing but a tattoo and a name. Some treated her with reverence, almost superstition. Others peppered her with questions she refused to answer. How many confirmed kills? What's the worst thing you ever saw? What was your rank really like? Elena answered none of them. She poured coffee, served beer, wiped tables. To her, the bar wasn't a stage. It was a post. And Marines didn't grandstand at their posts. But she couldn't ignore that her invisibility was gone. One evening, about 2 weeks after the confrontation, Murphy came to her with a look she hadn't seen before, part worry, part pride. There was a news crew outside earlier, he said quietly. Local channel. They wanted to talk to you. I told them you weren't available. Elena's jaw tightened. Good. Murphy hesitated. Elena, you've got to know, this isn't going to stay quiet. Stories like this, vets standing up to gangs, they spread faster than fire. And the Vipers, he didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. I know, Elena said. Her voice was calm, but her hand brushed the dog tags beneath her shirt. She could feel the cool metal pressing against her chest, grounding her. That night, long after the bar had closed, she sat alone in the back booth. The jukebox was off. The chairs were stacked. Only the hum of the neon signs outside broke the silence. She pulled her reinforced tactical phone from her pocket and stared at the encrypted interface. It had been years since she'd used the secure network. Years since she'd reached out to the people who still lived in the shadows of Force Recon. She'd sworn she was done. That the part of her who needed this phone was gone. But she hadn't thrown it away. Marines never threw away their lifelines. Her thumb hovered over the screen. One message could bring old comrades to her side. One call could erase the threat of the Desert Vipers in a night. But it would also drag her back into a world she had fought desperately to leave. She put the phone away. Not yet. The Desert Vipers, meanwhile, were reeling. In a dingy garage 2 towns over, Viper Jackson sat hunched on a torn leather couch, his shaved head glistening with sweat. Around him, his men drank silently, the usual bravado gone. She made you kneel, one of them muttered finally, unable to hold it in. Viper's eyes snapped up, wild with fury. She humiliated all of us. You think this is about me? She called me by name, laid out my record in front of everyone. That bar isn't just Murphy's anymore, it's her fortress. And now every vet in the county thinks they own us. What do we do? Another asked, his voice low. Viper leaned forward, the snake tattoo on his neck rippling as his muscles flexed. We remind them who runs these roads. We remind them that one Marine doesn't scare us. We hit them where it hurts. But even as he spoke, there was hesitation in his men's eyes. They'd seen something in Elena that night, something they didn't want to face again. A presence that had cut deeper than knives or bullets. Still, pride was poison, and Viper was already drinking it down. Back at Murphy's, Sheriff Bradley stopped by more often. He sat at the bar with his coffee, not as a customer but as a sentry. Elena noticed. She didn't call him out on it. She appreciated it, even if she'd never admit it. You know they'll be back, he told her one evening as the sun bled red across the horizon outside. I know, she said simply. You ready for that? Elena set down the glass she was polishing and met his eyes. Sheriff, I was born ready for that. But I don't want to fight them. Not unless I have to. He studied her for a long moment before nodding. Then let me stand with you. I've seen enough men think they can handle everything alone. Doesn't end well. Elena gave him the faintest smile. Army, right? 2 tours. Then you know. Marines don't ask for backup. But they never turn it down either. The understanding passed between them, unspoken but solid. The turning point came on a Friday night. The bar was packed, veterans shoulder to shoulder with locals, the air thick with laughter and the smell of beer. Elena moved smoothly between tables, her tray balanced, her steps precise. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then the front door creaked open. The laughter faltered. The air shifted. A man in a leather jacket stepped inside, not a viper, but someone new. His jacket bore no colors, no patches. His hair was cropped short, his posture military. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and assessing, before landing on Elena. She froze. Recognition slammed into her chest like a blow. "Gunny Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying across the bar. "It's been a long time." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who was this man? Elena's hand brushed her dog tags again. She knew that voice. Knew the man behind it. And she knew her past had just walked through the door. The man who entered Murphy's Roadhouse carried himself like someone who had never truly left the core. His spine was straight, his eyes locked forward, scanning exits, cataloging threats. Every step was measured, every motion efficient. The kind of bearing you didn't learn in civilian life. The kind of bearing you never lost after years in uniform. Elena felt her throat tighten. It had been years since she'd heard that voice, but she knew it instantly. Captain Daniel Reeves. He'd been her commanding officer during her last deployment. A man both respected and feared among the ranks of Force Recon. Smart, ruthless when he had to be, protective of his Marines to the point of obsession. She hadn't seen him since the hospital at Camp Leatherneck, the night he told her she'd never walk again. Now he stood in the doorway of her fragile new life. The bar had gone utterly quiet, the tension thick enough to cut. Veterans recognized the posture. Civilians sensed the electricity in the air. Everyone looked at Elena. "Captain," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "What brings you to my AO?" The corner of his mouth twitched into something between a smile and a grimace. "Still sharp, Gunny. Still calling it like a battlefield." He stepped further inside, eyes flicking over the patrons. "Word travels fast. Even in the circles I run. A little bird told me you made a biker king kneel in front of a bar full of people." Elena exhaled slowly, setting her tray down on the bar. "That was nothing. Just protecting my post." Captain Reeves shook his head. "It's never nothing with you, Rodriguez. You don't do half measures. You don't just protect. You eliminate threats. And now? You've put yourself on the map. Not just with bikers. With people you really don't want noticing you." A ripple of unease moved through the bar. Sheriff Bradley shifted in his seat, his coffee untouched. Colonel Harrison's cane tapped once on the floor. Everyone could feel it, the conversation was no longer about bikers. This was bigger. "Why are you here, Captain?" Elena asked bluntly. Reeves looked at her, his eyes softening just enough to remind her of the man who had once pulled her bleeding body from rubble. "Because I owe you my life, Gunny. And because the Desert Vipers aren't going to take their humiliation quietly. Word is, they're talking to people. Dangerous people. People with money, weapons, and no conscience." The bar murmured at that. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Cartels?" Reeves nodded. "They want revenge, Elena. And they'll get it, even if they have to burn down this whole county to do it." For the first time that night, Elena's hands stilled. The weight of the moment pressed heavy on her chest. She'd expected the Vipers to come back swinging, but cartels? That was another battlefield altogether. She straightened, her shoulders squaring. If they come, I'll deal with them. Reeves leaned closer, lowering his voice but making sure the veterans nearby still heard. This isn't Fallujah. You don't have a platoon backing you. You've got civilians. A bartender. A sheriff with no gun after hours. You can't fight this war alone. Elena's eyes flashed. I didn't ask for backup. And you didn't ask for enemies either, Reeves shot back. But here they are. The two stared at each other, the air between them taut with unspoken history. Finally, Colonel Harrison broke the silence. He's right, Gunny. You can't take on organized crime with a coffee pot and a scarred back. You need a plan. You need allies. Elena's jaw tightened. She hated it. She hated the truth of it. She had spent years trying to disappear, to bury Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez and live as Elena the waitress. But the universe didn't care about her plans. It never had. She turned away, picking up her tray again, focusing on the simple act of refilling a glass. Her voice, when it came, was soft but carried across the room. Then I guess it's time I stopped pretending. That night, after closing, Reeves stayed behind. Jake cleaned in silence, pretending not to listen, but every word burned into his memory. You could walk away, Reeves told her as they sat at the back booth. Leave town before this escalates. No shame in that. You've earned peace. Elena shook her head. You don't run from your post. Not when people are counting on you. You think this bar is your post? Her eyes met his, unwavering. It is now. These people, they're mine to protect. I may not wear the uniform anymore, but that doesn't change who I am. Reeves studied her for a long time, then nodded. Then let me stand with you. I didn't come here to drag you back into the fight. I came because if war finds you again, I'd rather be by your side than anywhere else. For a moment, the hardened Marine Gunny and the battle-scarred captain sat in silence, two warriors bound by scars and memories too heavy for words. Finally, Elena said, if the Vipers bring the cartels here, this won't just be about me. It'll be about every veteran, every civilian, every family in this county. And if they want a war, she clenched her jaw, eyes hard as steel. Then we'll give them one. The next day, Murphy's Roadhouse was fuller than ever. Not with gawkers this time, but with veterans who had heard the whispers and come not just to drink but to stand. Men and women with unit tattoos, with prosthetic limbs, with eyes that had seen too much. They gathered not out of curiosity, but out of instinct. The bar had become a fortress. And Elena Rodriguez, once invisible, was now its commander. The Desert Vipers had not returned to Murphy's, but their absence was not surrender, it was strategy. In a low-lit warehouse on the outskirts of San Diego, Viper Jackson sat across from men far more dangerous than his leather-clad crew. The cartel representatives were calm, precise, their pressed shirts and quiet voices belying the violence they commanded. Where the Vipers thrived on intimidation and chaos, these men radiated something colder, control. You want revenge, one of them said in measured English, his accent curling around the edges. We want territory. Perhaps our goals can align. Viper clenched his fists. Images of Elena's calm face, of her voice commanding him to kneel, burned in his mind like acid. She humiliated me. In front of everyone. A Marine, retired or not, thinks she can run me off my own turf. No. I want her broken. I want her begging. The cartel man tilted his head. Marines are not so easily broken. You of all people should know that. Viper's jaw worked. His dishonorable discharge was no secret in the underworld. That's why I came to you. Give me the tools. The firepower. And I'll take her apart piece by piece. The cartel man's eyes were sharp, assessing. And in exchange? Viper swallowed. He knew what it meant to deal with cartels, nothing came free. You'll have access. The bars, the roads. Protection rackets become distribution points. We'll keep the locals in line. You get your product moved without interference. A long silence stretched. Then the cartel man smiled faintly. We will consider your proposal. But remember, Mr. Jackson, if you fail, your humiliation will not end with kneeling. Meanwhile, Murphy's Roadhouse was shifting into something unrecognizable. By day it still smelled of fried food and beer, the jukebox still croaked out classic rock. But the clientele was different now. Veterans came not only for drinks, but to check in, to make their presence known. Some left notes on the memorial wall. Others simply sat, keeping watch. It was as if the bar had become a new kind of FOB, forward operating base. A safe zone in the middle of hostile territory. And Elena, without ever asking, had become its commanding officer. Captain Reeves leaned against the wall near the bar most nights, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He spoke little, but his presence was undeniable. The veterans recognized him immediately, an officer's bearing never faded. Jake, though still green compared to the others, had started walking differently. His back straighter. His voice more confident. He shadowed Elena, learning by observation, how she scanned entrances, how she tracked conversations, how she anticipated trouble before it happened. You're training him, Reeves remarked one night after Jake had left to lock up. Elena didn't look up from the glass she was polishing. He's training himself. I'm just not stopping him. He wants to enlist. I know. You going to stop him? Elena paused, then shook her head. Marines don't stop anyone from standing on their own 2 feet. We just make sure they understand the cost. Reeves studied her, his expression unreadable. And do you understand yours, Gunny? You didn't just humiliate a gang. You declared yourself. That kind of declaration always brings war. Elena's hand stilled on the glass. Then let it come. The first real test came 3 nights later. It was a Saturday, the bar packed, the air warm with laughter and smoke. The veterans were relaxed but never fully unguarded, their eyes always flicking toward the door, their seats chosen carefully with sightlines in mind. At 10:43 p.m., the door opened. 3 men entered, young, cocky, their jackets unmarked. They weren't vipers, but their swagger was familiar. They spread out quickly, eyes sharp, scanning the crowd. Elena felt it instantly. The room shifted. Conversation dimmed. She approached them calmly, her order pad in hand like any other server. What can I get you? One smirked. Depends. You serve more than drinks? His tone was sharp, mocking. Behind the bar, Jake tensed. Several veterans pushed back their chairs, ready. Elena didn't blink. We serve everyone here. With respect. If that's a problem, you're in the wrong place. The second man leaned in close, his breath hot with liquor. We heard this place is protected. Heard you're the one who did it. The big, bad Marine. The words hung in the air. The veteran straightened. Sheriff Bradley, in his usual corner, set down his cup. Elena's eyes remained calm. You've heard correctly. The man's smirk faltered. He had expected denial. Fear. He hadn't expected confirmation. Then consider this a warning, he said, his voice dropping. The Vipers aren't finished. And when they come back, they won't be alone. Elena's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Shoulders squared. Weight centered. A veteran in the back whispered, "Here we go." But Elena didn't fight. Not yet. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low, steady, carrying across the silent bar. "Tell your boss," she said, "that this county isn't his territory anymore. It belongs to every Marine, soldier, sailor, and airman who bled for it. If he wants a war, he'll find out what that really means. The men faltered. For a moment, they looked like boys playing at toughness, realizing they had stepped into a world they didn't understand. One muttered something under his breath, and they left as quickly as they had come. The bar exhaled. Jake's grip on the bat loosened. Veterans muttered approval. Reeves leaned close to Elena. You just painted a target on your back even brighter. Elena watched the door swing shut, her jaw tight. Good. Better me than them. That night, after the bar emptied, Elena sat in the back booth with Reeves and Sheriff Bradley. The table between them was littered with coffee cups and ashtrays. We need to prepare, Bradley said quietly. If the Vipers partner with cartels, this isn't just intimidation anymore. This is war on our streets. Reeves nodded. They'll come hard, fast, and messy. Civilians could get caught in it. We can't let Murphy's turn into a battleground. Elena's eyes were dark, determined. Then we take the fight before it comes here. Marines don't wait behind walls. We strike first. The sheriff frowned. Elena, this isn't Afghanistan. This is California. There are laws. She leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with steel. Sheriff, with respect, you think cartels care about laws? You think the Vipers care about jurisdiction? I've spent my life fighting men who only understood force. And if that's the language they want to speak, then I'll answer. Reeves's lips curved into a grim smile. Looks like the gunny's back. Elena's gaze hardened. She never left. The attack didn't come at Murphy's. That was what caught Elena off guard. She had expected the Vipers to storm through the doors one night, all bravado and gasoline, with cartel weapons slung over their shoulders. She had expected the bar to become a battlefield. Instead, they hit the town. It was a Wednesday evening when the first fire started. A small diner 2 blocks away, owned by an elderly couple, both Navy veterans. Flames licked the night sky, and though the fire department got there fast, the building was gutted. A note was left on the smoldering remains, "This is what happens to friends of Murphy's." By Friday, 2 more businesses were hit. A mechanic's garage. A corner store. Both veteran-owned. Both burned. The message was clear. The Vipers weren't coming for Elena directly. They were dismantling her community, one piece at a time. Murphy's Roadhouse filled with fear. Veterans came not just to drink but to watch the news, to share reports, to check on each other. Some offered to patrol. Others wanted to arm up. The civilians, too, looked to Elena, though most didn't even realize they were doing it. Her presence, her calm, her quiet authority, it had become a pillar. But inside, Elena was boiling. She stood in the back room one night, fists clenched, staring at the dog tags hanging from her neck. The burns on her ribs ached, old scars reacting to stress. She wanted to fight. Every fiber of her being screamed to strike back. Yet she remembered the colonel's words, the sheriff's caution, this wasn't Fallujah. Civilians lived here. The rules were different. Still, she couldn't sit idle while her people suffered. Captain Reeves found her pacing. "You're ready to explode," he said simply, leaning in the doorway. Elena glared at him. "They're burning down veteran businesses. Families. And we're just supposed to sit here and pour coffee?" Reeves shook his head. "No. But we're supposed to be smart. You taught me that once, Gunny. Never fight on their terms. Make them fight on yours." Her jaw tightened. "So what's your plan?" Reeves stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I still have contacts. Intel. People who know where the cartel moves their shipments, where the Vipers hide their stash. We cut off their resources, we expose them. We don't just fight back, we dismantle them. Elena stared at him, her eyes narrowing. That's not civilian law enforcement. That's Black Ops. Exactly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elena exhaled. We do this, Reeves, we cross a line. There's no coming back. Reeves gave her a thin smile. When have either of us ever been good at coming back? The next evening, Murphy's held a meeting. Not a planned one, just something that happened, the way things often did in military circles. Veterans gathered at tables, civilians joined, and soon the bar buzzed with tension. Sheriff Bradley stood at the front, coffee in one hand, his other planted firmly on the table. We need order, he said, his voice steady. The Vipers want chaos. If we respond with chaos, they win. We have to be strategic. They're burning our businesses, a Marine vet snapped from the back. We can't just sit on our hands. We won't, Bradley said firmly. He glanced at Elena. She stood slowly, every eye on her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I know what they're trying to do, she said. Divide us. Break us apart piece by piece. But Marines don't scatter under fire. We tighten formation. We hold. She paused, scanning the room. Every veteran in this county, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, your family. Civilians too. This isn't about Murphys anymore. This is about all of us. And I won't let them take it. Her words hit like a command. The veterans nodded, their shoulders squaring. Even the civilians straightened, as if suddenly part of something bigger than themselves. Colonel Harrison, seated with his cane, tapped it once on the floor. Gunny's right. We've been scattered for too long. Maybe this is the fight that finally unites us. The room erupted in agreement. But that unity was tested within days. Late Saturday night, as Murphy's closed, headlights flared across the parking lot. 3 trucks pulled up, engines growling. Men piled out, Vipers mixed with cartel foot soldiers. Not dozens, but enough. Enough to make a point. Jake froze behind the bar. Murphy reached for the phone. Veterans stood, hands flexing, eyes narrowing. Elena walked calmly to the door and pushed it open, stepping into the night air. The bikers froze when they saw her. The cartel men didn't. One stepped forward, his face shadowed under a cap. His hand rested on the grip of a pistol tucked into his waistband. You're making trouble, he said flatly. His accent was thick, his words clipped. This ends now. No more resistance. No more Marines. This bar burns tonight unless you walk away. Elena stood tall, her shoulders squared, her voice steady as stone. You think fire scares me? I've walked through fire. I've bled in fire. And I'll walk through yours if I have to. The cartel man sneered. You're one woman. Behind her, the bar door creaked open. One by one, veterans stepped out, men and women of every age, every branch, each one standing shoulder to shoulder. Sheriff Bradley. Colonel Harrison with his cane. Jake, pale but defiant, clutching the bat. Elena's voice rose, carrying across the lot. She may be one woman. But I am not alone. The sight was enough to make the cartel men hesitate. The Vipers shifted uneasily, remembering the humiliation of their last encounter. For a long, taut moment, it was a standoff, darkness pressing in, violence hovering in the air. Finally, the cartel man spat on the ground. This isn't over. He turned, motioning for the others to follow. Engines roared, and the trucks pulled away, their red taillights vanishing into the night. Elena stood there, watching, her chest heaving slowly. She knew what this meant. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. And next time, they wouldn't come with warnings. That night, after everyone left, Elena sat alone at the memorial wall. Her eyes lingered on the photo of Williams and Chen, the Marines who hadn't made it out of Fallujah. Her voice was barely a whisper. Another fight, brothers. Another post to hold. I'll carry it for you. Her hand pressed against her tattoo, against the scars beneath. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding them. She wasn't ashamed. They were her armor. And the war wasn't done. The uneasy truce lasted less than a week. Elena had known it would. Men like Viper Jackson didn't lick their wounds and walk away. Cartels didn't retreat after a warning. They were regrouping, planning, waiting for the moment when fire and blood could send the clearest message. That moment came on a Thursday night. Murphy's Roadhouse was crowded as usual, a mix of veterans and locals, laughter blending with the jukebox's country ballads. The air felt almost normal again, tense, yes, but calmer after the last confrontation. Elena moved between tables with her usual precision, scanning faces, reading the room, always alert but never showing it. Then the power went out. The jukebox cut mid-song. Lights blinked and died. The bar plunged into darkness, followed by a chorus of uneasy murmurs. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hiss of the beer taps losing pressure. And then came the roar, an explosion outside. The windows rattled, a flash of orange seared across the parking lot. Someone screamed. Elena's instincts took over. Down, she barked, her voice a whip crack. Veterans hit the floor instantly, dragging civilians with them. Years of conditioning snapped into place, and the bar moved like a squad under fire. Glass shattered as the front window burst inward. A Molotov cocktail rolled across the floor, flames licking hungrily at the wood. Another followed. And then, gunfire. The Vipers had returned. And this time, they weren't alone. Chaos erupted. Patrons crawled toward the back, shielding each other. Jake, pale and shaking, grabbed the fire extinguisher and doused the spreading flames with frantic bursts. Sheriff Bradley drew his concealed sidearm, positioning himself by the door, returning fire in measured bursts. Elena didn't hesitate. She moved low and fast, dragging an older vet who'd been hit by glass behind cover. Her hands were steady as she ripped open her apron pocket, pulling out the compact medical kit she always carried. Gauze, clotting agents, pressure bandage. Her fingers worked with surgical precision, even as bullets thudded into the walls around them. "Hold pressure here," she ordered another vet, her tone calm, commanding. The man obeyed instantly. Reeves appeared from the back hallway, a shotgun in his hands. His voice cut through the chaos. 2 trucks outside. At least a dozen men. Cartel and Vipers. Elena's eyes burned in the flickering firelight. Then we hold the line. Outside, Viper Jackson stood near the trucks, his snake tattoo glistening with sweat, his eyes wild with rage. He had waited for this moment, plotted it with his cartel backers. Tonight, Murphy's would burn, and the Marine would be nothing but ash and memory. "Light it up," he roared, waving his men forward. But what he hadn't counted on, what he could never have understood, was that Murphy's wasn't just a bar anymore. It was a fortress, manned by warriors who had spent years in combat zones far worse than this parking lot. The first cartel gunman who tried to rush the door went down hard, Sheriff Bradley's shot finding its mark. A second was tackled from behind by 2 veterans who had slipped out the side exit, their fists and boots doing the work bullets couldn't. Inside, Elena crouched low, her hands steady as she reloaded the shotgun Reeves had tossed her way. She popped up, fired through the shattered window, dropped 2 more attackers, and ducked back down in one smooth motion. Her movements weren't frantic. They were precise. Muscle memory carved by years of training. "Jake," she barked. The young bartender looked up, fear etched in every line of his face. "Kitchen. Get the gas off. Now." He didn't question. He ran. The fight stretched on, a brutal exchange of gunfire, fists, and fire. The bar shook with each impact, the air thick with smoke and the acrid tang of burning wood. Then came the scream. Maria Santos, the flower shop owner, the Navy corpsman, collapsed near the jukebox, blood spreading across her blouse. Elena was there in seconds, sliding across the floor, tearing open her medical kit. "Stay with me, Maria," she murmured, voice low, steady, as her hands worked. Gauze. Pressure. Tourniquet improvised from a bar rag. Maria's eyes fluttered, pain etched deep. "Still, corpsman," Maria whispered through gritted teeth. "Still serving." Elena's jaw clenched. "Damn right you are. But not tonight. Tonight you're surviving." She worked like a woman possessed, every motion efficient, every decision immediate. Around her, the battle raged, but for Elena, time slowed. There was only the patient. Only the mission. When she finally looked up, Maria stabilized but unconscious, her eyes met Reeves's. His expression said it all: "We can't hold forever." Outside, the cartel regrouped. Viper roared, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "Push them. Burn it all." One man lit another Molotov, ready to hurl it, only to have it shot clean out of his hand. The bottle exploded against the pavement, fire consuming the attacker in seconds. Veterans on the roof had taken positions, their rifles steady, their aim true. The tide was turning. Realizing it, the cartel men began to retreat, dragging wounded with them. Engines roared to life. Within minutes, the trucks screeched out of the parking lot, leaving behind smoke, blood, and silence. Inside, Murphy's was wrecked, broken glass, bullet holes, scorch marks across the floor. But it still stood. And so did its people. Elena moved through the wreckage, checking each wounded, directing veterans to apply pressure, improvise splints, keep airways clear. Her voice was calm, her eyes sharp. She was back in a combat zone, and she thrived in it. When she finally stood still, her hands stained red, her chest heaving, the bar erupted in something unexpected. Applause. Not the rowdy cheers of drunk patrons, but the deliberate, steady clapping of men and women who understood what they had just witnessed. Elena froze. Then shook her head, her voice low. "Don't clap for me. Williams and Chen deserve the applause. Maria deserves it. Every one of you who stood tonight deserves it. I'm just doing what I was trained to do." Her words carried weight. The clapping stopped, replaced by nods, solemn and respectful. But inside, Elena knew the truth: this wasn't the end. This was the opening salvo. And the next fight would be worse. Later, as dawn broke and the bar smoldered quietly, Reeves approached her outside. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the cool morning air. "They'll be back," he said. Elena's eyes were fixed on the horizon. "Good. So will we." She turned back toward the bar, her home, her fortress, her post. The battle wasn't over. It had only begun. The smoke still clung to Murphy's Roadhouse 3 days after the attack. The air smelled of scorched wood and spilled whiskey, and the bar's windows were patched with plywood. Bullet holes scarred the walls, reminders of a night that no one would forget. But Murphy's wasn't empty. It was full. Fuller than Elena had ever seen it. Veterans and civilians alike crowded inside, hammering boards, scrubbing soot, hauling lumber. Someone had brought food, another had brought tools, and before long the bar looked less like a place of business and more like a military camp. Rebuilding wasn't just about wood and nails. It was defiance. "This place is ours," Sheriff Bradley said as he drove a nail into the frame of a shattered window. "They want to burn it down? We'll build it back twice as strong." Nods followed his words. Men and women moved with purpose, a rhythm that felt almost like a field operation. Murphy himself stood behind the bar, directing traffic. "Elena, where do you want the new counter placed?" She froze at the question. "Where do you want it placed?" Not Murphy. Not the owner. Her. And that was when Elena realized the shift. The bar wasn't just Murphy's anymore. It wasn't even about a business. It had become something more, a symbol. And she, whether she wanted it or not, had become its commander. By mid-afternoon, cameras showed up. A local news van parked out front, reporters rushing in with microphones and questions. "Elena Rodriguez, is it true you're a Force Recon Marine? Did you really make a biker leader kneel? What do you say to claims the bar is now a militia hideout?" The crowd bristled. Veterans muttered curses. Jake tried to block the reporters, his face red with anger. But Elena simply stood still, wiping her hands on a rag, her face calm. Then she walked forward, her voice clear, cutting through the noise. "You want a story?" she asked. "Here it is. A group of criminals tried to burn down a veteran-owned business. They failed. Not because of me. Because of us. Because veterans don't scatter when under fire. We stand together." The cameras clicked, capturing her standing tall amid the smoke-stained ruins, the eagle, globe, and anchor tattoo just visible at the edge of her collar. A reporter pressed, "Are you forming some kind of vigilante group?" Elena's jaw tightened. "No. We're not vigilantes. We're Americans who served this country once and will serve it again, right here at home, protecting our community. If that scares the Vipers, or anyone else, good. It should." The crowd behind her erupted in applause, drowning out the reporter's next questions. The cameras had gotten what they came for. The story would spread far beyond San Diego now. And Elena knew it. That night, as she scrubbed soot from the bar counter, Reeves leaned against the wall watching her. "You just went national, Gunny. I didn't ask for that. No Marine ever asks. But history doesn't care." Across town, in the cartel's warehouse, the footage played on a grainy television. Viper Jackson stood in the shadows, watching Elena's face fill the screen. The crowd behind her. The authority in her voice. Each word felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "She's turning the whole county against us," one of his men muttered. Viper's teeth ground together. "Then we don't burn bars anymore. We don't play around with Molotovs. We cut off the head." The cartel lieutenant beside him nodded slowly. "You want her gone? Fine. But you don't kill a Marine like that with fire and bullets. You break her spirit. You make her lose what she's fighting for." Viper's eyes narrowed. "Then we take someone close. Someone she'll bleed to get back." His gaze slid toward a photo one of his men had snapped, a blurry shot through a window of Murphy's. Elena. Jake. Sheriff Bradley. Maria Santos on a stretcher. Targets. The next evening, Murphy's was nearly finished. The walls repaired, tables polished, the memorial wall expanded with new photos and patches. Elena walked the room slowly, her hand brushing the wood, her eyes taking in every detail. Jake approached, nervously adjusting the new bat he kept tucked under the bar. "You think they'll come back?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She studied him, the way his hands trembled slightly, the way his jaw clenched. He was young, untested. But he was willing. "They already have," she said softly. "Every fire they set. Every bullet they fired. That was them coming back. And they'll keep coming until they think we're broken." Jake swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" Elena looked at him, her eyes hard but not unkind. "We show them what happens when you try to break Marines." That night, she sat alone in the back booth, staring at her phone. The secure one. The one she had sworn never to use again. Her thumb hovered over the encrypted contact list. Names of old comrades. Men and women who had disappeared into private security, government contracts, places no one talked about. She had resisted long enough. Her thumb tapped. One message sent. Need a recon team. High threat. Civilian area. Murphy's Roadhouse. She set the phone down, her chest heavy. Once you reached out, there was no turning back. And Elena Rodriguez knew she had just declared war. The reply came faster than Elena expected. Her secure phone buzzed at 0600, its encrypted tone pulling her from a restless sleep in the small apartment above Murphy's. She picked it up, thumbed the unlock, and read the single line of text glowing on the screen. Gunny. On our way. Hawk team. ETA 36 hours. Her chest tightened. Hawk team wasn't just any group. They were Marines who had gone black long before Elena retired, contractors, shadow operators, ghosts who moved between wars without anyone admitting they still existed. If they were coming, the fight wasn't just local anymore. Elena set the phone down slowly, staring at the dog tags on her nightstand. She had wanted peace. She had wanted anonymity. Now she had summoned war back to her doorstep. By midday, Murphy's Roadhouse was bustling again. Repairs were nearly finished, and the community had rallied like never before. Civilians brought food and drinks for the workers, veterans drilled security positions quietly in the parking lot, Sheriff Bradley coordinated patrols. It felt less like a bar and more like an FOB, Forward Operating Base Murphy. But Elena couldn't shake the weight in her gut. She knew the Vipers wouldn't wait long. Pride demanded they strike back soon. That strike came sooner than anyone expected. It was late afternoon when Jake disappeared. Elena noticed first. He was always around during prep hours, wiping down the bar, checking stock, trying to look useful under her unspoken mentorship. But by 5 p.m., there was no sign of him. His phone went unanswered. His car was still parked behind the bar. Then the call came. Elena answered, her jaw tight. Gunny Rodriguez, Viper Jackson's voice sneered over the line. I told you we'd break you. You took my pride. Now I take yours. The sound of Jake's muffled voice came through the background, panicked. Elena. Don't, a sharp crack cut him off. Elena's blood turned to ice. If you hurt him. You'll what? Kill me? Viper laughed, harsh and ragged. You had your chance. No, Gunny. You're going to meet me. Alone. Tonight. Desert Road by mile marker 27. You show up, maybe the kid lives. You don't, we send him back in pieces. The line went dead. The bar erupted the moment she told them. Veterans slammed fists on tables, demanding action. Sheriff Bradley cursed, pulling out his phone to organize a rescue. Captain Reeves's face darkened, his eyes sharp with old battlefield calculation. You can't go alone, Bradley insisted. They'll expect me, Elena said flatly. They'll expect you alone, Reeves countered. That's the trap. They want to pull you out and crush you. Elena's jaw clenched. Then we turn the trap. Night fell heavy on the desert highway. Elena drove the beat-up pickup Murphy loaned her, headlights slicing through the darkness. Her dog tags hung against her chest, cold against her skin. On the seat beside her sat a pistol, a combat knife, and a small trauma kit. She didn't wear body armor. Didn't need it. She pulled off at mile marker 27, the desert wind howling around her. Ahead, floodlights flickered to life, illuminating a circle of bikes and trucks. The desert Vipers waited, cartel men scattered among them, weapons glinting. At the center, tied to a chair, was Jake, bloodied but alive, his eyes wide when he saw her. Viper Jackson stepped forward, snake tattoo writhing in the harsh light. His grin was jagged, triumphant. Well, well. The great Gunny Rodriguez, all alone. He spread his arms. You humiliated me. Made me kneel. Now I'm going to return the favor. Elena's face was stone. She took 2 steps forward, her voice carrying clear. You should have killed me when you had the chance. Because now? You don't walk away from this. Viper laughed, throwing his head back. You think you're still in Fallujah? This is my desert now. And you're outnumbered 20-1. That was when the first shot cracked through the night. One cartel man dropped, a clean round through the shoulder. Chaos erupted as more gunfire rained down from the ridges. Figures emerged from the darkness, silhouettes moving with lethal precision. Suppressed rifles, night vision optics, tactical gear. Hawk Team had arrived. Contact left, someone shouted, but it was too late. Hawk operators moved like phantoms, cutting through the cartel lines with disciplined bursts. Veterans from Murphy's, who had followed covertly under Reeves's command, surged from the shadows, flanking the bikers with brutal efficiency. The trap had been reversed. Elena charged forward through the chaos, bullets whining past her ears. She moved like she was 20 again, her body remembering every movement drilled into her bones. She reached Jake's chair, slicing through his restraints with her knife. You okay? She barked. His voice shook, but he nodded. Why yeah. Then move. Stay low. She shoved him toward cover just as Viper roared, lunging at her with a knife. Steel flashed in the floodlight. Elena pivoted, grabbed his wrist, twisted hard. The blade clattered to the dirt. Viper swung with his free hand, catching her across the jaw, but she absorbed it, drove her knee into his gut, and slammed him to the ground. He gasped, rage and disbelief mingling in his eyes. You can't win. Elena's face hovered inches from his, her voice deadly calm. I already did. The moment you touched one of mine. She slammed him once more into the dirt, leaving him groaning and broken as the fight raged around them. By the time the shooting stopped, the desert was littered with groaning men. Cartel survivors had fled, Hawk Team stood tall, and the Vipers, those who weren't down, were on their knees, hands laced behind their heads. Jake clung to Elena, his face pale but alive. I thought you weren't coming. She steadied him with a firm grip. Marines never leave one behind. Reeves approached, his shotgun slung. He glanced down at Viper, bleeding and broken in the dirt. What do you want to do with him? Elena looked at the man who had caused so much pain, who had tried to break her community. For a long moment, her face was unreadable. Then she turned to Sheriff Bradley, who had cuffed another biker. Sheriff, she said simply. Do your job. Viper's eyes went wide as Bradley hauled him to his feet. You can't lock me up. I'll. Elena's voice cut him off, cold and final. You'll kneel to the law this time. And next time, there won't be a next time. As dawn broke, the battlefield was cleared. The cartel threat wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but the Vipers were shattered. Their leader was in custody. Their reputation destroyed. But Elena knew the fight wasn't over. It never truly was. Still, as she stood in the desert wind, Jake at her side, Hawk Team fading back into the shadows, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not because the war was over, but because she had chosen her fight. And she had chosen her people. By the time the sun rose over the desert, the story had already outpaced the truth. Reporters swarmed Murphy's Roadhouse like vultures. Camera crews lined the parking lot, their vans parked beside pickup trucks and motorcycles. Headlines blared across the morning news. Ex-Marine and local veterans take down biker gang. Cartel allies foiled in desert ambush. The Force Recon waitress who stood against violence. Elena hated every word. She had spent years burying Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, trying to live quietly as just Elena, the woman who poured coffee and folded napkins. But now the world refused to let her disappear. Inside the bar, the atmosphere was tense but proud. Veterans crowded together, replaying the battle in rough voices, civilians whispering with awe. Jake, bandaged and pale, sat at the bar with a soda, refusing to leave Elena's side. "You're a damn hero," Murphy said gruffly as he poured himself coffee. Elena shook her head, jaw tightening. "Heroes are the ones who didn't come home. I'm just stubborn." But Murphy's words weren't his alone. Outside, the crowd was chanting, "Elena! Elena!" She clenched her fists, retreating to the back room, away from the noise. Captain Reeves followed her. "You can't run from this," he said simply, leaning against the doorframe. "You've become the face of something bigger than yourself." Elena bristled. "I never asked for that. No Marine asks for their mission, Gunny. They just complete it." She turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "What mission? Protecting a bar? Chasing off bikers? This isn't Fallujah. This isn't recon." Reeves's voice softened. "No. This is harder. In war, you knew the enemy. Here, the lines blur. But these people, they see you as proof. Proof that strength doesn't die when the uniform comes off. Proof that they're not forgotten." His words cut deep. Elena looked away, her jaw trembling. "I didn't want to be a symbol." Reeves gave her a sad smile. "Symbols don't get to choose. They're forged by fire. And you just walked through it again." By the weekend, Murphy's was packed wall to wall. Not with rowdy drinkers, but with veterans, families, even local officials. The bar had become a sanctuary. Photos and medals filled the memorial wall. A hand-painted sign above it read, "Still serving." Sheriff Bradley stood at the front, speaking to a local councilman. "We need more protection. The cartel isn't done. If they couldn't break Elena, they'll try to break the county." The councilman frowned. "And what do you propose? Deputizing veterans? Turning Murphy's into a base? That's not sustainable." Bradley's jaw clenched. "Then give us resources. Support. We can't leave this on one woman's shoulders." But when the councilman looked across the room, his eyes landed on Elena, and he shook his head. "She doesn't need our help. She already has more authority here than any politician." That night, Elena finally addressed the crowd. She hadn't planned to, but the veterans wouldn't leave until she spoke. She stood near the bar, her dog tags glinting faintly under the lights, her voice carrying steady. "You all think I'm something I'm not. You call me a hero. A leader. But I'm just like you. A Marine who wanted peace, who thought she could disappear." She paused, scanning the room. "But we don't disappear. Not really. The world doesn't let us. The scars, the nightmares, the training, it stays. And maybe that's not a curse. Maybe it's a responsibility." Silence hung heavy. "I didn't win this fight alone. None of us did." Sheriff Bradley stood. Reeves stood. Jake stood. Every veteran who carried a rifle or a fist or a prayer, you stood. That's what won. That's what always wins. Not one warrior. Many. The crowd erupted, not in chants of her name, but in applause that felt less like adoration and more like unity. For the first time since the bar fight weeks earlier, Elena allowed herself to smile. Just a little. But far from Murphy's, in the cartel's warehouse, the mood was darker. Viper Jackson sat in chains, bruised and bloodied, his eyes hollow. Across from him, the cartel lieutenant leaned forward. "You failed," he said coldly. Viper's lip split as he tried to speak. "She had help. Contractors. Veterans. They came out of nowhere." The lieutenant's gaze sharpened. "Then we adapt. Marines pride themselves on being few but strong. So we send more. We send stronger." His voice dropped to a whisper, lethal and certain. "If Elena Rodriguez wants a war, we will give her one." Late that night, Elena sat alone in Murphy's after everyone had left. She sipped cold coffee, staring at the memorial wall. Her eyes lingered on the faces of Williams and Chen. She spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "You didn't die for nothing. I'll carry it. For you. For them. For all of us." Her reflection in the darkened window stared back, not just Elena the server, not just Gunny Rodriguez the Marine. Something new. A bridge between both. A leader forged in peace as much as in war. And she knew the fight wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The quiet before the storm was suffocating. For a week, Murphy's Roadhouse stood like a fortress. Veterans rotated watch outside. Sheriff Bradley coordinated patrols with deputies. Hawk Team lingered in the shadows, their presence unacknowledged but deeply felt. But everyone knew the cartel wouldn't stay silent. Elena felt it in her bones, the way a Marine feels the pressure drop before a firefight. Every night she lay awake in her apartment above the bar, listening to the hum of the highway, waiting for the sound of engines that meant the fight had come to her door again. The waiting was worse than combat. It happened on a Saturday night. The bar was full, laughter and music echoing against walls still scarred from the last battle. Elena moved between tables, tray in hand, her eyes sweeping the room. She almost allowed herself to feel at ease. Almost. Then the lights flickered. Engines roared outside. And the world exploded. The first blast tore through the front wall, splintering wood and glass, hurling patrons to the floor. Screams filled the air as smoke poured in. A second explosion rocked the parking lot, one of the veterans' trucks going up in flames. "Contact." Reeves's voice boomed through the chaos. Cartel gunmen poured in through the shattered front, rifles raised. Behind them, Viper's remnants surged forward, desperate for revenge. Elena dropped her tray and moved without hesitation. Her voice cut through the panic. "Down. Move to cover. Vets, defensive line." The bar transformed instantly. Veterans flipped tables, creating barricades. Civilians crawled behind them, shielded by bodies that had once fought in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. Sheriff Bradley drew his sidearm, firing controlled bursts. Reeves pumped his shotgun, the sound thunderous. And Elena became Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez again. She moved through the chaos like a conductor, directing fire, dragging the wounded, returning shots with lethal precision. Her dog tags slapped against her chest as she vaulted the counter, taking down 2 gunmen with quick, controlled bursts. But the cartel kept coming. Grenades shattered windows. Bullets chewed through wood. Fire spread along the bar top. For a moment, it felt like Fallujah all over again. Jake stumbled toward her, his face pale, clutching a pistol someone had shoved in his hand. "Elena. We're surrounded." Her eyes locked on his trembling hands. "Then we break the circle." She grabbed his wrist, steadying it, forcing his breathing calm. "Focus. Aim. Squeeze. Don't flinch. You're not alone." He nodded, eyes hardening. And when the next attacker burst through the side door, Jake fired, steady, true. The man dropped. Elena allowed herself the briefest flicker of pride before turning back to the chaos. Outside, Hawk Team struck. Their suppressed rifles barked in the dark, dropping cartel shooters from the flanks. Coordinated, precise, merciless. The ambush was reversed. Still, the cartel pressed harder. One of their trucks slammed into the side of the bar, breaching the wall. Gunmen poured through. Elena was there waiting. She swung a length of broken wood like a staff, knocking one rifle aside, driving her elbow into a jaw. She twisted, snatched a pistol from another's belt, and fired point blank. Her movements were fluid, brutal, beautiful. But in the chaos, Viper Jackson appeared. Bloodied, half-mad, escaped from custody with cartel help. His snake tattoo glistened with sweat, his eyes wild with hatred. "You ruined me," he screamed, charging at her with a blade. Elena met him head-on. Their clash was primal, marine against outlaw, discipline against chaos. He slashed, she blocked. He lunged, she sidestepped, driving her knee into his ribs. He was bigger, stronger, fueled by rage. She was smaller, faster, fueled by purpose. The fight crashed through the wreckage of Murphy's, glasses shattering under their boots. He grabbed her by the throat, forcing her back against the wall. The blade gleamed inches from her face. "You think you're better than me?" he roared. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "No. I know I am." She twisted, wrenching his wrist, the blade clattering free. With a surge of strength, she slammed him to the floor. Her knee pressed into his chest, her knife at his throat, his own weapon turned against him. "Yield," she growled. For a moment, Viper froze, then his defiance shattered. His head dropped back. His body sagged. The fight was over. The cartel broke soon after. Hawk Team cut through their remaining fighters with surgical precision. Veterans surged forward, driving them back into the desert night. Engines roared as the survivors fled, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Silence settled over Murphy's at last. Smoke curled from the shattered roof. Bodies littered the floor. The jukebox sparked and hissed, broken. But the bar still stood. And so did Elena. Dawn broke over the ruins. Reporters arrived within hours. Police swarmed the scene, hauling away survivors in cuffs. Federal agents whispered about cartel retaliation, about jurisdiction, about charges. But none of it mattered to the people in the parking lot. They gathered around Elena, civilians, veterans, deputies, every one of them looking to her. Not as a waitress. Not as a Marine. But as their leader. Colonel Harrison, leaning on his cane, stepped forward. His voice carried the weight of decades. "Gunny Rodriguez. You held the line. You stood when others would have fallen. You've reminded us all what Semper Fidelis means. Always faithful." The crowd murmured in agreement. Jake, battered but alive, stood beside her, his voice trembling but proud. "You saved me. You saved all of us. You can't hide anymore, Elena. You are the symbol." She looked at them, faces weary but unbroken, scarred but proud. The community she had once tried to fade into. The family she hadn't known she still needed. Her voice was steady as she spoke. "I'm not a hero. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just a Marine who refuses to abandon her post. And this," she gestured to the bar, "the people, the town, this is my post now." Applause rose, not wild, but strong, unified, unshakable. And for the first time, Elena didn't flinch from it. She stood taller, shoulders squared, the sun catching the eagle, globe, and anchor tattoo that marked her forever. She had tried to disappear. She had tried to bury her past. But fate had chosen differently. Elena Rodriguez wasn't invisible anymore. She was visible, on her own terms. Not just a survivor. Not just a warrior. A protector. A leader. Still serving. Always faithful. Elena Rodriguez tried to live quietly, to fade into the background. But fate had other plans. When the Desert Vipers and cartel brought war to her doorstep, she reminded the world that true warriors don't seek recognition, they carry strength quietly and unleash it only when necessary. In the end, Elena didn't just save a bar. She saved a community. She became the symbol she never wanted to be, visible, unshakable, always faithful. What about you? Have you ever underestimated someone's strength, only to be stunned by what they carried inside? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to True Echo, where we bring you powerful stories of courage, resilience, and the human spirit. Your support helps us share voices that deserve to be heard.